Hello everyone and welcome back to Vocally Annotated. Long time no see. I really honestly feel a bit out of practice with doing this, but hopefully this will be fine. But the reason I'm out of practice is because I was in Japan for 3 weeks and it was incredible. And I know everyone and their mother, literally everyone and their mother, is going to Japan at the moment. And then out of those people, a significant number of them are making content because everyone's going to Japan, so everyone's looking up Japan content. But I really wanted to throw my hat in the ring anyway. I had a great time and I want to talk about it, give some, reflect on what I did, what I learned, and also give some advice for anyone who is thinking of going to Japan, who's also planning their Japan trip. For context, I went in the last 3 weeks of May. I went with my husband. He had some stuff that he was doing there, which is why our route went the way that it did, which you'll understand in a second. And then that put obviously some constraints on our trip, but I have no complaints. I will also get into that. But that's why we went, and that's why our trip looks a bit different to a lot of people who are going for the first time. And we went because, he had some stuff to do, and that's why we were there. But I've wanted to go to Japan since I was a kid. Like, I got into, it's funny because when I think about it, it's like I've always watched anime, right? Because I used to watch Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z, but when I was a kid, I didn't think about them as anime. I just thought about them as cartoons. It was just something you watched. I remember the day I found out that the English Pokemon I watched was actually the dub of a Japanese anime. It was like mind blowing. I couldn't comprehend it. So I've always watched anime in some capacity, but then when I really got into anime, I was about 11, and from then I wanted to go to Japan, especially because I tend to watch a lot of slice of life anime. And so obviously when they're slice of life and they're going about their daily routines, they're doing it in Japan, you can see more clearly how different things are there compared to here, right? Because it's supposed to be rooted in reality. Like a lot of things, when we were there, it was like I already had an understanding of how these things work in Japan because I watch slice of life, whereas my husband, who watches, I guess more commonly popular anime, and I don't mean that he only watches popular anime, but it tends to be like the fantasy or whatever, like that kind of not supernatural, but like extraordinary, like a bit out of this world anime. So he was just like, he had no idea about certain things. Point being, I've wanted to go to Japan for a very long time, so I was very happy finally for the chance to go. So in terms of where we went, I like to phrase it as we went from Nagasaki to Narita. If I can find a map or like make that work, I'll put that on the screen right now if you're watching the video version of this podcast. But we were in Kyushu, which is a southern island, and we went to Nagasaki, Kumamoto, Karatsu, Dazaifu, Fukuoka, Kita-Kyushu, and then we moved on to Honshu, and we went to Hiroshima, Uji, Kyoto, Osaka, and Tokyo. Oh, and we stopped at Mount Fuji, but like I forget to include Mount Fuji when I'm, verbally speaking about it because it's not a town or a city technically. But yes, we covered a lot. We were pretty much like go, go, go non-stop, and it was exhausting. I'm not going to front about that. It was absolutely exhausting, and if you're going, please be prepared. Again, we were working within certain constraints that we had, and if we were doing it, completely independently, or if we were doing it next time, we wouldn't necessarily do that. But I'm glad it worked out the way it did. So I want to go through our trip for the podcast, and I've decided the best way to do it is to use the report format. So if you're not familiar with this format, it was a TikTok trend and I saw people use it on Substack. I've used it on Substack as well. But you have the letters R-E.P.O.R.T, and they each stand for something. So the first R is reading, eating, playing, obsessed with, recommend, and treat. So I figured it was a nice way to break down 3 weeks, because otherwise if it's like, what did you do for 3 weeks? We did this, and then we saw this, and it's boring to listen to, whereas this is a more thematic roundup of our trip, and I think it'd be more interesting. So to start with, what was I reading? I was actually reading Crazy Rich Asians. I read the trilogy. Everyone is always like, the Crazy Rich Asians, of course you're going to watch that movie on the plane. And I've read the books before, and I enjoy the books more than I enjoy the movie. Also, there's 3 books in one movie, so you get a lot more enjoyment out of the books, right? Just because there's more content to consume, if you want to refer to books as content. But The thing is, okay, so reading the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy was a reread for me. I've read it before. I first read it in 2021, I think, when I realized that there was actually like the movie was based on a book series. And every so often, I come back to it because it's just such a fun, easy read. Like, it doesn't really take anything for me to read it. It's just the only way I can describe it is like it's a very vibesy read. And at the time I read it, and also invariably I come back to it because I'm like, oh, I'm in a reading slump, nothing, I want to read. I like the act of reading, but I don't know what to read because nothing is appealing to me or sounds interesting. So then I end up going back to something like Crazy Rich Asians, and I go back to that quite frequently. That was part of the reason why I read it for this trip. I thought it was like fun because, like I said, people typically watch Crazy Rich Asians on the plane. Can I speak? So it was fun for that, but it was also like, I need something to read. I want something fun to read, and I had been reading a couple of books before we left, and I was like, these were fine, but they're not, like, I didn't enjoy them in the same way. There's 3 books, and we were gone for 3 weeks, so it was actually worked out absolutely perfectly because I started reading the first one on the plane there, and I finished the last one on the plane back, so it was really just so perfect. But the funny thing when it comes to the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy, to me, is that I sound like such an evangelist because I'm always recommending this series to people. A friend of mine has just left for Japan, so she's there right now for 3 weeks. When my sister was flying, she was going on a trip. I was like, she was talking about watching Crazy Rich Asians on the plane. Look, if you say that enough, it's such a tongue twister, I swear to God. I mean, she was talking about watching the film on the plane, and I was like, oh, why don't you read the book series? Like, again, they're really chill, they're really easy. Even if you're not particularly a reader, which my sister is a reader, but even if you're not particularly a reader, like, you can get into them. And she was like, bro, all you do is talk about this book series. And I was like, the thing is, I sound like such an evangelist, and I don't feel like an evangelist particularly. Like, I'm not like, oh my God, this is the next best thing in American literature. It's not that. Like, to be frank, there are certain things in the books that really irritate me. Like, the author has certain turns of phrase that he is really fond of using, and I'm like, you use this way too much. You use it across too many characters also for it to be like, this is this character's one tick and that's how they talk. Like, no. You you use it, you pepper it so much throughout, and it just gets worse throughout the books. I don't think he's intentionally doing it, it's just like people. Basically, the phrase he uses a lot is like, back in our X days, like back in our London days, back in our uni days. And I'm like, I don't know personally anyone who really talks like that. If you said that phrase, you've said it like once offhand, I don't think about it. It's not, no one uses that phrase enough that it shows up multiple times in the same book, let alone multiple people. Okay, I think this is just like one of his hallmark signatures, whatever, right? So things like that really annoy me, and it annoys me more and more each reread. However, like, the books are still fun, and yeah, I just sound like an evangelist because I'm like, hey guys, everyone, read this book or read these books. It's not because, like I said, it's not because I think they're the best books ever, but they're just fun and easy without being like some absolutely meaningless speech read, especially because the people I tend to recommend it to is like the people who would have watched Crazy Rich Asians already, or they're open to that kind of thing. I've been rambling for a really long time about Crazy Rich Asians. But this is what I mean! I sound like an evangelist, and I'm not an evangelist. I don't. They're just. If you need something to read to get you out of a reading slump, read them. Also, another thing that's gotten me out of a reading slump before was reading the Avatar Kyoshi books. If you're an Avatar The Last Airbender fan, then you know. Those books were also good. I think they're targeted. I'd probably say they're like young adult, but they're not supremely young adult, so they're actually. They can span quite a decent age range, I'd say. But yeah, if you're an Avatar fan, those will also grip you. Well, they gripped me and got me back into reading again when I needed them. When I needed them most, they appeared in the world. But I actually need to reread them. It's been a really long time. So yes, I was to wrap it up. In case you didn't quite catch that, I read the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy while I was traveling. It is so bloody hot right now. It's just too hot to function, and I can't have the fan on because it affects the recording, so I'm really feeling it at this point in time. We've been recording for almost 12 minutes total. So, yeah. Actually, while we're on the topic of reading, I did buy some magazines while I was in Japan, so I'm just gonna go grab them and show you. So one of the things I bought while I was there was this magazine. It says it's from the summer of 2021, but this is the one that was available in the shop. I don't know. It's a travel magazine about Kyushu, basically, but it goes through, like... So this, if you can read that, it says, crafting the future, meeting the crafts people, reshaping tradition. And it goes through, like, craft in Kyushu. I think it's quite cool how it's in both Japanese and English, and it includes a lot of really pretty pictures and, you know, a lot of information about native craftspeople, and especially highlighting a region that doesn't really get the same level of tourism and attention. So I was really interested in that, also because, like I said, we were in Kyushu, so it was really interesting to read. Like, there's some stuff in here about karatsu and karatsuyaki, which is the karatsu earthenware pottery. That is that native style. That's what that town is especially known for. So even though I already knew it was a thing and I'd already been to karatsu to buy some, it was still cool to read about it and get some more context and background on that particular thing. There are some other books and magazines I bought, which I'm not going to touch on now because I think they'll go better in a different section. So I'm going to move on from reading because I've talked a lot about things I've been reading. I feel like I had another magazine that was about crafts, like Japanese art, like craft and all this kind of thing, but I can't seem to find it right now. But yes, at the very least, I have this one. So, moving on to eating, because I think I've spent enough time on reading. Eating, okay. Some of the best meals I had in Japan. So, for context, my husband and I were eating lacto-ovo-vegetarian the whole time we were there. It is not impossible. You know, that was one of the things that people used to say before. It's like, oh my god, if you're a vegetarian, what are you going to do in Japan? It's like, okay, you're not going to eat Japanese food to the highest extent of their capability. Like, you're not eating the things that they're really famous for and stuff, but it's not impossible to eat in Japan. I'm gonna go through some of the best meals we had while we were there. But I'll be honest, we also ate a lot of combini food. There are decent vegetarian options in combini food. There's a lot of tofus and protein milks and egg sandwiches, so I think if you're lacto-ovo-vegetarian, you're alright, but if you don't eat eggs, then you will struggle. And I'm gonna be real about that. Okay, in terms of food places, two come to mind that I genuinely just really loved. And if you're watching the video version of this podcast, I will include clips. So one of them was this vegan ramen we had in Kumamoto. We had ramen a couple of times while we were in Japan. That one was my favorite one. And it kind of sucks that it was like right at the beginning of the trip, so we didn't get to eat. Like, I didn't get to feel like I had really good vegan ramen again, but that one was really nice. And I'm not a big ramen person because, quite honestly speaking, it's got nothing to do with the ramen itself. It's everything to do with me and the fact that I make a mess when I eat ramen, historically. So I don't know what was in the air, but I managed to eat that one alright, and it was all good and dandy. But yeah, it was really tasty, vegan ramen. We also went to an okonomiyaki place in Nagasaki. This place was really cool and it was really interesting. It was like 10-15 minutes from the Peace Park in Nagasaki, so obviously like the site of the atomic bomb hypercenter, and the, like I said, Peace Park to commemorate peace and all that. You know, to typical tourist sites. It's only a 10-15 minute walk from there, and yet it's like you walk just 5 minutes and you feel like you're in this residential neighborhood, and you feel like, this is very much not, it doesn't feel like central Nagasaki, like tourists go here. It's just like, okay, this is just where people live. Nagasaki is quite a small town in that way, I would say, you know, feel wise. And so we walked to this place, and it definitely wasn't like completely a neighborhood joint, you know, where people are like, if the menu's in English, then you've gone to a tourist trap, or like a touristy place. Like, here, there was an English menu, but at the same time, I was like, I don't know how much this place is really frequented by tourists. However, I think this is also part of the thing, is because we were eating lacto-ovo-vegetarian, we were relying a lot on Google Maps and, you know, apps like Happy Cow while we were there. So there's going to be a limit to how much we can make these like one-off cool discoveries somewhere like Japan, right? So anyway, this okonomiyaki place. But it's like when we went in, felt very much like, this is the neighborhood joint. Like, there was a TV on with the news or sports or something, and it was very, like, there were posters and stuff up on the inside everywhere, and, you know, it looks like other local diner type joints, food places that I've seen, like, in pictures and stuff of Japan. Anyway, the owner was really lovely. We had conversations with him through Google Translate. Like he said in his menu, you know, I'm sorry, I'm very stupid and I don't speak English. And I was like, no, why would you say that? Why would you say that about yourself? You're not stupid just because you don't speak English. And then my husband, said in Google Translate, like, it's okay, we don't speak Japanese. And then the guy was like, you know what, that does actually make me feel better. So thank you for saying that. But we had like good back and forth conversations with him in Google Translate. He was lovely. He made us okonomiyaki and without dashi, which is fish stock, which was really cool. Because I was like, I didn't think I'd be able to eat okonomiyaki because I use fish stock. So it was nice to be able to get that opportunity. I'm pretty sure he just used water and it was a really lovely experience. Okonomiyaki is nice. I enjoyed it, and it was also very different, right? Like having the grill and stuff in front of you and being able to eat it. It was another one of those things where it was like, I've seen this in like slice of life anime and I'm actually getting to eat it myself now. Those two stand out the most. I'm just trying to think what else we ate. We ate at a few Indian restaurants, which I was like, I don't want to be, before we left, we were like, we don't want to be the Indian people who go abroad and we eat at Indian restaurants. Lo and behold, we did. At least one of them was an accident. So in Dazaifu, we went to an Indian restaurant where we had South Indian food. It was interesting. Like, I wouldn't, to be honest, say it was the best meal, but it was interesting because the chef was Japanese, and it was funny seeing how they had Japanese, I don't know, Indian food. So, like, it was basmati rice, but the rice was sticky. And when they served the vegetables on the side, they served it in small amounts, like you might imagine seeing in a bento box or something. So it was really interesting how they adapted it to Japanese tastes, both like literally the taste of your tongue and aesthetically. To be honest, the other reason we ate a lot at Combini's was just because of our timings. We struggled because we were like on the go so much. We struggled to have the time to sit down and eat, but also in terms of managing when restaurants were open, closed, whatever. If they were busy, that was one thing we didn't expect, is that it was so busy on weekends that we needed reservations, and we landed on a Friday night, so the next day was Saturday, and obviously everything was full because it was a weekend, but we weren't expecting that at all because it wasn't peak tourist season. So we struggled with that as well in terms of getting food because we were there for 3 full weekends. I'm just going through my saved Google map of everywhere we went. It's kind of a mix of like everywhere we went and everywhere we wanted to go. But in Hiroshima, we went to this vegan restaurant, which was again near the Peace Park. And that one was really nice. Once we established that we could get food for cheap, basically, we saved a lot of money on food, especially because we weren't going to get the same benefit out of spending on food as other people will. So we didn't go to, and like I said, there was all these issues with finding restaurants and stuff. So we didn't go to too many. But there was this one restaurant we went to in Hiroshima called Jogesayu near the Peace Park, and that was really nice. Like the atmosphere was really nice. It felt like it was very much like date night vibes, even though we were already on holiday together, and the whole holiday is like one big date night, right? But there were people there who it was very much like it looked like they were on their date nights as well, and it was just a nice atmosphere. The food was decent, and yeah. Oh, also not speaking of food, but like in terms of another consumable edible good, no coffee in Fukuoka. I really liked the lattes and stuff. One thing to note about matcha lattes is that you might like matcha lattes in your country. I'm talking about like the UK, for example. I like drinking a matcha latte here. I go out and I'll get one from a cafe if they've got the option. However, if you're getting a matcha latte in Japan, just know that you are getting a latte without syrup or any kind of sweetener in it, and it will be bitter because matcha is bitter. If it's got syrup or any sweetener in it, you've walked into a touristy place, which is fine, but just be aware of what you're doing, right? So just be aware that if it doesn't say there's any syrups or anything, assume there aren't, and it will be bitter, and take that with a pinch of salt. Also, you might get it hot, so you have to be very clear about the fact that you want it iced. So just something to bear in mind. One thing I will say about the food, and I'm going to touch on this more, I'll expand on this in a broader sense later on, but when it came to the food, for certain cities, and I'm talking very much like golden route cities that everyone goes to, I would see all these recommendations on like Instagram and TikTok, and I had them saved as places I wanted to go. But then unless we had especially gone out of our way, we had a different style trip. Like a lot of the trips you see, like TikToks, for example, of people in Tokyo, like they've gone there to shop, they've gone there to go to these places. And we weren't doing that. We had other things on our itinerary already. So we weren't going to be able to do that nearly as easily. And yet, I saved those places because I was like, well, it's good to have inspiration for when we're there and like be prepared kind of thing. But when it came to the Golden Route, because there was so much content about like, oh, you can eat at this restaurant, you can eat here, look at this old person who's running this restaurant by themselves, and we should give them our support and our custom instead of going to these big chains or whatever. I definitely felt the pressure to do that, even when it wasn't conducive to our plans, and it was kind of annoying that I couldn't just vibe. And also, again, in a lot of cases, like if you go to these small independent places, they're not necessarily going to be able to tailor the food in the ways that we would have needed. But yeah, like because we were on the go so much during the day, like we didn't end up going to any izakayas and stuff and being able to have that experience. And there's always like next time and, something to go back to. But yeah, I definitely, getting back on topic, I felt that pressure to like go to these specific places. And it was like, I'm giving recommendations because these were places I enjoyed, but I also don't want to make anyone feel like, they have to go to this place because like it's incredible and a must see and whatever, because that's just not helpful when you're actually there, especially if you are doing a more active holiday and you're walking around a ton. And I don't just mean walking around, I mean like traveling as well between places, because the traveling eats up a lot of time and energy. Okay, next in the report format we have playing. I didn't really know what to put for this one because I wasn't really playing any music. Like when we went places, I wasn't really on my headphones. I didn't really use them like the way I would here. If I was going out in London here for the day, I would have my headphones in and I'd be listening to a podcast or something as I was walking around. But there I didn't really do that. And it felt kind of weird, but at the same time, I noticed the difference between doing it then and then coming back to London and using my headphones as normal, how much I was taking in while I was there because I didn't have my headphones on. I wasn't listening to anything else. I mean, that was also partly because I was traveling with someone rather than just going out by myself for the day. But it's just like you take a lot more in, and I felt a lot more present there. So yeah, the consequences, I didn't really have anything particularly. Like I was listening the few times I did listen to stuff on my headphones when I was by myself. I was listening to podcasts. I didn't really listen to music. I didn't really watch any movies in the evening because I'm gonna be real. Like Japan is a really overstimulating place, as my brother said to me. Japan is overstimulating. Is Japan in a nutshell. And it was just like everything, even when we were in less stimulating places like not Tokyo or Osaka or Kyoto, it was still like a lot to take in, and I really needed that decompression time, and I was not feeling like using a screen to do it. Even YouTube, like I wasn't really I like watching YouTube as a recreational activity, but I wasn't really able to focus on YouTube videos in the same way while we were there. So yes, wasn't really playing anything. The closest thing I can say for this is Stardew Valley, because when we left, I was really into Stardew Valley, and I made sure it was on my computer ready for me to play on the plane. I didn't end up playing it on the plane, which is really sad, but it was then it was set up, and I was like, we've got a 12-hour flight. My farm's gonna be unrecognizable after this flight, and it just didn't pan out. But yeah, I guess that's like the closest thing I can say is I was really into playing Stardew Valley right before we left. Like I like Stardew Valley anyway, but I was just particularly going through a Stardew Valley phase at that time, earlier in the spring. At the moment, I am replaying the Ace Attorney games. If anyone has heard of them, has played them, please let me know, because I don't know nearly enough people who are aware of the existence of Ace Attorney and enjoy it. Ace Attorney is definitely my favorite game series by far. But anyway, that's what I'm doing right now. But at the time, I was playing Stardew Valley, and if I didn't feel so packed like a sardine, I would have gotten my laptop out and played while we were on the plane. I think that's just something I've realized now is like I'm not going to be one of those people really who gets their laptop out on the plane. There's just no space. Like especially on some of these airlines and stuff, like in economy, I'm talking about. If it was premium economy or whatever, like okay, fine, different story because the seats are bigger, but like in economy, a laptop is not getting pulled out my bag. And now I'm prepared. And now I've got Stardew Valley on my tablet, and it won't be the same safe profile, but that's fine. I'll have my travel specific farm that I play when I'm flying, but yeah, lesson learned on that one. Also, in terms of playing, I'm not a big movies person on the plane. I actually find flying quite a restless experience. Like, I can't focus on anything for too long, except for reading, I guess. Like, when I was reading Crazy Rich Asians, I got really into that and I was enjoying that. That was like the only thing I was able to do for an extended period of time. But yeah, some people are like, if they had a 12-hour flight, they would just go through movies. And I was like, maybe I could do a little Back to the Future marathon. I didn't end up doing that. I watched the first one again. It's been a while since I saw that. I watched The Devil Wears Prada. What else did I watch? I watched something else. One of the flights. I watched a Hindi film, Lapta Ladies, which I'd been planning to watch and it was there, so I was like, okay, why not? Otherwise, yeah, I don't really do films and I don't really do films I haven't seen, so even though both the Wicked films were there and I haven't seen them, I didn't end up watching them in the end. Also, when it comes to Back to the Future 2, like when I was thinking about doing a Back to the Future marathon, Back to the Future 2 was historically my least favourite Back to the Future. And I was like, okay, if I'm feeling resistance to watching number 2, I could skip it and just watch number 3 and that's fine. But I also want to watch number 2 again, because I'm like, I don't really remember much about number 2. I didn't enjoy it at the time. Would I feel different now that I'm an adult? And also, it's past 2015, guys. We're past 2015. I don't know. I think I should give it a go again. I just don't think that the plane was the right environment for me to do it. Okay, moving on. Obsessed with. This one is easy. Japanese fashion. So earlier I was talking about Japanese craft. For me, the craft includes the fashion, and everyone talks about, again, like I was talking about, like everyone and the mother goes to Japan and they make content, and they make a lot of content about Japanese fashion and what makes it different from fashion in the West. Now here's the thing, okay, I was really interested in, being there, being able to see it for myself, and after I saw it firsthand, I was like, okay, people weren't exaggerating when they said that everyone in Japan like dresses well. Everyone has a sense of style. That wasn't, but at the same time, I wanted to dig into it myself and explore that and think about it. Like, I thought about it a lot while we were there, but without it being like, oh, because it's Japan, it's, so cool or whatever. Like, I didn't want to apply this weird Orientalist lens to it. I think one of the funny things is actually, speaking, like when I was talking about books and reading earlier, I also picked up this Popeye. This is the best style sample, a compilation of fashion snaps from 2020 to 2026, and it's in English, which is why I picked it up. Like, I thought about picking up the Japanese latest edition of Popeye, and I was like, and if you're not aware, Popeye is a Japanese fashion magazine. God, I'm hitting everything. Popeye is a Japanese fashion magazine, but like Japanese fashion magazines tend to be more manual and less magazine than we understand in the West, and they are very cool. Seem like teaching materials basically, so it's like you want the look, but you don't just want the look, like you want to learn how things work together and stuff. And Popeye is one of the more famous ones, so I did consider picking up a copy of the latest issue while we were there, but it was in Japanese, and I was like, I don't want to have to Google Lens translate every single bit on every single page. After that, I kind of wished that I had maybe just picked one up, but I was like, I can buy it here in London and yeah, it'll be more expensive, but if I really want it, then I can do that. But there was one interesting spread here. Let me try and find it. There's this one interesting spread. If you can see that, if you're watching the video version, London, it's photos taken in London on a rainy day. And the caption says, all winter, it's a standoff with the clouds. Let's look at how London boys dress for the weather. They really don't use umbrellas. And it's this disbelief. Like, when I was doing research on what to take to Japan, I was like, well, should we just take our raincoats? Like, because May isn't the rainy season, but June is. So if it rains, then what? And everything I read was like, don't take your raincoats. Don't waste the space on raincoats, because we also did try to pack minimally. Even though we were like, oh, we're not going to do shopping. But it's like, we still wanted to pack minimally in case we did shopping. And I don't know if we shopped because we had space, or it's space. Like, was it that we were going to shop anyway, and so it was good we kept the space, or is it that we shopped because we had the space? I don't know. But anyway, everything was like And don't bring your raincoats. Use umbrellas. Japanese people are very much umbrella people. Raincoats will just not get used and they'll take up space and whatever. So we were like, okay, cool. And it was also saying, don't bring your umbrellas. You can buy them here. And it did rain on one day that we were there. So it was very abundantly clear from that day, like, yes, Japanese people are umbrella people. I feel like I'm rambling now, and this is a pretty well-established thing. So I found it funny when I read that, and it was like, the caption says, they really don't use umbrellas, like this sense of disbelief that, like, wow, people don't use umbrellas. And then all the pictures proceed to be of people in hooded coats or whatever. They're wearing hoodies underneath their coats, or they're wearing a coat with a hood. And they're walking through the rain in London. This is a very normal sight in London. This is a very common thing to do in London. This makes a lot of sense to me as someone who has grown up in London. And yet the feeling of like, wow, they really do things differently. That's exactly what I mean. It was so funny to me to read that. Like, I bought this edition of Popeye at the airport on the way back. And it was like, after the whole trip, it was funny to see that and see that kind of lens turned on the UK. Like, it could have been turned on anyone, but it meant more, I think, to me because it was, my hometown. And I didn't want to be like that when it came to Japan and Japanese people and Japanese fashion, basically. So I was trying really hard not to be like that. So to get into some of the actual observations I made, everyone was wearing, well, almost everyone was wearing like oversized clothing, kind of like this t-shirt that I'm wearing, where it was like, if you're wearing a short sleeve t-shirt, it's baggy and the sleeves go to like your elbow crease. They don't stop at a conventional sleeve length like they do in the West. Even if the clothes weren't meant to be baggy, people bought oversized, like they bought a couple sizes too big kind of thing and wore it. But then having said that, this was more common in like Fukuoka because we spent a lot of time in Fukuoka. Because when we were in Kyushu, we were there as like the base, and then we did day trips to everywhere else. So when we were in Fukuoka, I saw a lot of that. But then it was like when we went to other places, it was like, okay, you are like, I was seeing the different fashion styles and aesthetics associated with each place. Like some places I was like, they're kind of like mid fashion wise. Like I would say Nagasaki didn't stand out to me as a particularly fashionable city. It wasn't unfashionable. Like, no, it was unfashionable, but it wasn't a particularly fashionable city. Kyoto, honestly, I didn't get a read on Kyoto because I saw more tourists, I feel like, than I saw regular people. So it was just nigh impossible. Osaka had interesting style. We weren't there for very long, but I liked Osaka style. And then Tokyo, I've seen people describe Tokyo as having a more mature style thing, and I think that's true, where it's like, not everyone is going to be... I feel like Fukuoka has a very trendy style, and Tokyo doesn't necessarily have a trendy style, but it will have its little like pockets of style, like these people congregate here, these people congregate there, and within that, it's very normal to see people in different styles walking around Tokyo, if that makes sense. But yeah, Fukuoka is definitely the trendiest place that we went to, which I felt was just it was just like, I didn't really know anything about Fukuoka going into it, but I really liked the people watching aspect of it because everyone was very trendy. Wired headphones were also really big in Fukuoka, especially compared to other places. Like, the general fashion sense skewed more young in Fukuoka than I felt it did in other places. But I liked it. There was an energy about it. We were also staying like right in the middle of downtown entertainment district, so that also helped. So yeah, everyone was wearing oversized clothes. And then another thing I noticed was people were wearing a lot of graphic t-shirts. And I don't tend to wear graphic t-shirts as much anymore. I used to wear them a lot. I used to love a graphic t-shirt when I was younger, especially if it had like something relevant on it that told the observer about me or my personality. Like, I had this one t-shirt when I was a kid, it said "Brother for sale, will take any offer." That my mum had bought me from Primark, and that was my favorite t-shirt. I rinsed that to absolute death. And so I was seeing all these people with their graphic t-shirts, and I was like, their graphic t-shirts look really nice with that outfit. And now it's kind of making me feel like I should be wearing more graphic t-shirts because it adds a lot of texture, right? But then there was a day I was in Fukuoka, like the shopping center, and I was just walking around looking at stuff. And I saw this one graphic t-shirt, and I was like, and I read the writing, like the text on the graphic, and I don't remember what it said, but I just remember it was kind of nonsensical. And then something like clicked in my brain. I was like, oh, like people wear graphic t-shirts just for the sake of there being a graphic almost. And it reminded me a lot of India. In India, you'll see people wearing graphic t-shirts and it's like, why, like what is this? Like this is gibberish. Why are people wearing this? Why are people selling this and stuff? But then it was like, oh, well, people are doing it here in Japan, and because it's in Japan, it's cool. And that really just like clicked something in my brain. And it was like, yeah, certain things are cool because it's Japan, but they're not cool anywhere else. It also helps with how they style it. Like when the way they style oversized clothing looks very intentional. And I think it goes back to this culture of like learning how to do things and having the fashion manuals and stuff. Like people know how to dress in oversized clothing, right? Whereas I don't think that same thing is taught or like talked about anywhere else. Also, speaking of oversized clothing, one thing I didn't mention earlier is like, yeah, people were wearing a lot of oversized clothing. There was a reason for that. It works really well in the humidity. We see that in other cultures where it's like really humid and people wear really loose, baggy clothes for the airflow. But once like the first day with it, I was like, I understand this now. You really need this in the humidity. It works very well. So there was also like the practical aspect to it. Obviously, there were other people who were wearing like women would be wearing like short skirts and stuff, but in yeah, Fukuoka, I lean more into the more like oversized androgynous side of trendy rather than the teeny tiny women's sizes, which I'm like, why are you capable of fitting into these? I have concerns, I have questions. That's besides the point. Those are some very specific thoughts on Japanese fashion. In general, I just became, yeah, I think obsessed is the right word. Like, I was really enjoying just people watching and seeing how people put things together, and I got so many ideas. A lot of the clothes seem a lot more creative than the things that are commonly available here. I mean, I don't know about commonly available. One thing about me is I try to prioritize natural fibers as much as possible, and I try to look for clothes where I'm like, you know, decent construction, at least as much as possible. When you shop at places like that, the clothes tend to be very boring. Like this t-shirt, for example, this dark brown t-shirt doesn't feel intuitively like a summer t-shirt. And sure, it pairs really nicely with this turquoise necklace, right? And then that makes it a bit more interesting. But the t-shirt itself is inherently not very interesting aside from the oversized silhouette. But yeah, a lot of the clothes I buy tend to be boring just because like I want nicely made clothes, and it really sucks. It means if I want anything to be interesting, I have to DIY it, and like I am open to DIYing things and I have some skills, so I'm lucky in that respect, but it just sucks to have to DIY everything. And I don't know about the quality of the clothes that people were buying there. But even I bought one top from a couple tops. I bought one top from GU, which is Uniqlo's like sister company, but the clothes are cheaper and a bit more trendy. It's like the H&M compared to if Uniqlo is like, I don't know, COS vibes, but cheaper priced. Um, and even that was like that one top from GU was constructed pretty decent. Like it doesn't look like a top from a H&M equivalent on at all. So I'm like, I guess in that respect, there's more options available to people because they can shop at different price points and they can get the more interesting clothes and then pair them with the more classic pieces. Like there was always a sense of balance. Things were interesting. It gave me a lot of ideas for DIYing, but then again, it's like I have to DIY it myself because you can't get that here. One thing about the clothes in Japan is they use a lot of synthetics, and I watched a really good video on this by the YouTube channel The Casual, which I will link in the show notes below. And his video is about the use of synthetics in summer clothing specifically, because when I think summer clothing, I think like linen, first and foremost, especially for humidity, cotton, silk, whatever, like natural fibers. But in Japan, they prioritize synthetic fibers, and it's because they've got a different perspective on what it means to be dressing for warm weather. Basically, you want synthetic fibers because you don't want to look like you've interacted with your environment, and that's just how Japanese people think. It's like this idea that you have to be put together. Okay, I just realized it was dark, so turn on the light. Hopefully the lighting is still okay because the light's on. I had to close the window, so hopefully I don't become too much of a sweaty mess. But where was I? Yeah, they have like their attitude is like you don't want to look like you've interacted with the environment. That is how you feel about the temperature, and how you're reacting to the weather is like your personal thing to deal with, basically. So they sell a lot of products that are designed to keep you cool and regulated, help you manage the heat. like cooling wipes you can buy at the pharmacy to like wipe down your pits or whatever. Um, people carry around fans, a lot of matte, if not makeup products, then like things you can add on top of your makeup to refresh it and mattify. And part of this is also like synthetic clothes that won't look crumpled and creased, and things like the Uniqlo Aerism range, which helps with airflow so you don't look as worn out as you might feel, basically, is what it comes down to. But his video is very interesting. Please go watch it. And it obviously is going to go into like more depth than I will, just trying to remember what he said off the top of my head. But I found it a very interesting take. I mean, it makes sense in the context of like Japanese philosophies, but it's very interesting because it's like in the UK, when it's hot, like it's been hot for the last few weeks, everyone is struggling, everyone is going through it, everyone is like, yeah, they look like they're struggling and they're suffering, and even if they don't look like it, they're going to tell you about it as soon as they talk to you. And even if you want to argue like, oh, it's the UK and people aren't used to it and therefore like, and people will talk about the weather anyway in the UK. True, but my husband and I were watching Sacred Games, which is an Indian Netflix show, and I was introduced, it came out in like 2018. I was introducing him to it, and in that, like, you got some big name actors. It's on Netflix. I think it was like it was the first Indian TV show on Netflix, right? So this is a very big deal show, but people are walking around with full sweat patches on display, like just absolutely dripping, covered in sweat, because it's set in Mumbai. It's set in a really hot, humid place, and people sweat. And when they're police officers and they're running around and they're not in, air-conditioned offices or anything, and they're having to, like, they're on the ground, they're gonna sweat because that's normal. And that, we watched the last few episodes of that show while we're in Japan. It was really interesting to then compare it to the different philosophy I was seeing in practice. Whereas, like, in India, it's just like, yeah, it's hot. Everyone's hot. Everyone, like, the weather's, yeah, it's just like that. Like, you don't even think about it. It doesn't even register as a thing to discuss, because it's just like, yeah, and what? Like, that's just how it is. In the UK, the weather is a thing to discuss because the weather changes a lot, or especially recently, we've had more unpredictable weather. Whereas in Japan, it's just like I don't really know what it's like in terms of small talk, but at the very least, like outwardly, your physical appearance, you don't acknowledge the weather other than like, okay, wearing short sleeves because it's summer and you're wearing a coat because it's winter, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? It was interesting to see that philosophy in practice. Another thing that was interesting to see was how the age boundaries when it comes to fashion are more collapsed than they are in other places. Like, you'll see people across a variety of ages wearing very similar clothing and styles, and it's not like, oh, this style is reserved for young people. And to some extent, I did feel like, especially at the beginning of the trip when I wasn't as used to it, like I would see like middle-aged men who were wearing styles that I'd also seen like 20-something men wearing. It was like, you almost look like you're trying to dress young, and I know that's not the case, but you look like it. It was a very interesting like thing for me to wrap my head around. Again, The Casual has a video on that. They have a lot of really good videos when it comes to Japanese fashion, so I highly recommend checking out that channel if you're interested. I thought it was also quite interesting to have that collapsed like age boundary in fashion in the context of an aging population. Like, this hasn't got anything to do with fashion, but it was very interesting to see the aging population like up close and personal, because like I've learned about it in school and that was a while ago. So like, this has been a thing that people have talked about in this capacity for at least 20 years, and now I'm able to see it myself. And yeah, I understand why. Like, I wonder what it looked like 20 years ago when people were talking about it, and I see what it looks like now, and like how young people flock to certain, like, if not the big city like Tokyo, they're flocking to regional cities like Fukuoka, right? And then in places like Kumamoto, it's more of a sleepy vibe. There's a lot more old people. Old people are, they're very visible in day-to-day life, whether they were still working. And then it's like, well, are you working because you need to work, or are you working because you just don't want to sit around at home doing nothing all day, which is like, fair enough. And there were a lot of old people also traveling, I guess because it wasn't the season for like young people, there wasn't school holidays or anything, like, so we weren't going to see as many families anyway. But there are a lot of old people traveling and I guess enjoying their retirements, and it's like, Yeah, cool, absolutely, as you should, but it's just like old people, like I said, are much more visible in day-to-day life there than they are here. But then it's like if you have this population, and from what I've heard, there are also a decent number of Japanese people who don't get married, or like millennials, I guess, who haven't gotten married, whatever, then it kind of, I don't know, this is a more controversial thought, and I'm just thinking out loud, like, don't hold this against me, but it's like that Peter Pan-esque syndrome that you see in the West, where it's like you have millennials who didn't get married and they didn't buy a house and do that, those traditional markers of adulthood that they had observed in the generations before them, and then they didn't get the chance to do that, and now they live like children, even though they're adults. Like, is it also related to that? Again, just me thinking out loud, and I'm not saying it is related to that, but it's like I wouldn't be surprised if there was some element in the background that was influencing it. And I guess that's more what I'm trying to say, is like an influence. Another thing I started reading in terms of thinking about Japanese fashion is Amatora, How Japan Saved American Style by W. David Marks. I've seen this was recommended on Articles of Interest in the Ivy, what's it called, season. And she interviews W. David Marks, and they talk about the origins of Ivy as a style, and it originates in Japan. It's very seriously recommend go listening to it. But being in Japan and being able to observe it all properly for myself, watching, like I said, more videos and stuff on it as a result of being there, being interested, I wanted to pick up this book. I tried to pick it up in Narita Airport and they didn't have it, and that made me very sad, but I got Popeye, so I had something to read on the plane. I feel like I had more nuanced takes on Japanese fashion when I was there, or like when I just come back, and now I'm blanking. And that's really annoying. I'm also kind of tired. Like, I've been recording for over an hour at this point, so yeah, that's also not helping. But as you can tell, I've spent a long time in this episode talking about Japanese fashion, so clearly it was the thing I was obsessed with. And I guess I'll wrap up this segment by saying that, to the point that it's made me, not rethink my style, but definitely open my horizons to trying different things and showing me different ways of styling things. And especially because, like, people really learn what they're doing, they're really interested in learning the craft, which is, I think, how I approach, I know this is how I approach things as well. So I really want to learn, like, how to balance the minimalism, but like also the detail, and how the process of constructing an outfit is just like, they're always just so good. Okay, I'm gonna move on. We've still got recommendations and treats. Recommendations. Like I said, one of my friends is in Japan right now, and I sent her a lot of advice. I sent her a big wall of text with all my suggestions, so I'm going to go through those because they were really helpful, and I know that these would be my recommendations to anyone else. Okay, one thing I will say is that Japan is really humid. When you're out and about all day, you're walking around a lot, you're sweating a lot, you might have some problems with water retention. Okay, especially like the time of year I went in May. She's there now, it's July. You might have some problems with water retention, and you might feel like, hey, I look really puffy. Why do I look puffy? It's not you, it's Japan. Also, because a lot of food is packed with salt, and that doesn't help with water retention, especially if you're having combini food. I think I alluded to this earlier. If you're eating the rice foods from kombinis in particular, like the onigiri balls and stuff, like they have a lot of salt in them, and you don't realize it, you don't taste it, but everything is really salty. They have this one drink at the kombinis, which is really helpful. It's called Pocari Sweat, and it's basically an electrolyte water drink. There's also Aquarius, but yeah, Pocari Sweat. When my husband and I got to Japan, we were like, hey, Pocari Sweat is kind of salty. Like, it's fine. We knew it was an electrolyte drink, right? So we weren't saying it like it was a bad thing, but it was just like, oh, this is a salty drink. By the time we left, 3 weeks later, we were like, hey, Pocari Sweat is kind of sweet. Think about that. Okay, this is what I mean. Like, Japan, the food is really salty. When we came back, we were like, no salty food, please. We've had our fill for a lifetime. Everything is just really salty. So, yes, if you look puffy, if you feel puffy, it's not you. Nothing has happened to you. It's Japan, I promise you. If you're interested in judo at all, I highly recommend visiting the Kodokan in Tokyo, which is a global judo headquarters. My husband is into judo. He is a new orange belt, so very proud of him. But he wanted to go see, like, the Kodokan. They have a little museum there, and originally he'd wanted to do a training session there. Turns out they have changed the rules and that wasn't updated, and whatever he was looking at So you can only do that if you're a black belt, and obviously he's not one yet. But you can still visit the Kodokan anyway, and you can watch the training sessions as they're happening. So we got to see the world champion Uta Abe training, and that was really cool because that meant that we didn't have to pay for Olympic tickets to be able to see her fight. When we were in Tokyo, we stayed in Ueno. I liked staying in Ueno because it was just so well connected. Like Ueno, what's it called? Not airport station. Oh my god, words. It's really hot in this room. Ueno station is really well connected. Our hotel was also near a station on the Ginza line, and it wasn't too far from like the Pink line. I don't remember what that one was called either. So it was really well connected. It was next to Asakusa, and if you're looking for like leftover vegetarian food or like vegan food or whatever, there's quite a few options in Asakusa. And Ueno station is also a 40-minute ride from Narita, so that was really convenient. So I really liked staying in Ueno. I don't know why you'd want to stay in Shibuya particularly, but maybe that's just me because I'm an introvert. Like, I'd want to go somewhere where it's quiet afterwards. Again, we didn't really do much nightlife stuff because we were so busy during the day and we knew we had to get up in the morning. So that would be a thing to do next time. Maybe we will want to stay in Shibuya then, but this time it just didn't make sense for us. When we went to Mount Fuji, we went to Mishima and we did the Mishima Skywalk to be able to see that. I don't think it's very popular with international tourists because a lot of the tourists we saw there were domestic Japanese tourists. And I think a lot of international tourists will go to other places like, wait, let me look up on maps so I don't say the wrong thing. Like Fujikawa Guchiko or Fuji or these other places, Fujinomiya. Like, I think like international tourists tend to go to these places when they want to see Mount Fuji. So yeah, we bypassed that. We went to the Mishima Skywalk. It was further from Mount Fuji, so the views aren't going to be as, like, it's not going to look as big. But like Mount Fuji is definitely big. It was a shock to realize how big it actually is. So you will be able to see it. You'll get great views. I can only speak for the time of year we went, but when we went in May, it was late May. It was on like the advice was to go first thing in the morning, basically, like as early as you can go, because by noon it will have clouded over and you won't be able to see the peak. And that was definitely true. And when I say it was big, it was like if the peak was covered, you couldn't tell that the mountain was there because the base just blended in with everything else, right? It was like you have to see the peak to actually be able to get the scale for how big it is, especially because it's surrounded by a lot of smaller mountains. And I always feel bad for the smaller mountains, you know? No one knows about the smaller mountains. No one cares about them. No one gives them any credit. No one knows their names, including me. I'm part of the problem. But yeah, if you want to see Mount Fuji, Mishima Skywalk was a good place to do it. Don't be afraid to takubin your suitcases. Oh my god, takubining the suitcases was so helpful. So we went with a small suitcase inside a big one, a small hand luggage one, and then one big one. And when we were city hopping, we were moving from Kyushu to Honshu to Tokyo, we just took one big one with us, and oh my god, such a great idea. Even that one big one felt kind of unwieldy to drag around a lot of the time. I mean, it was alright. It definitely wasn't that bad. It wasn't like, I don't know, it would have felt a bit unwieldy even on National Rail, so I think that's just the thing of having a large suitcase. But like, it really wasn't that bad, especially compared to what it could have been. So yeah, takubin your suitcases. If your hotel doesn't offer the takubin service, find your nearest 7-Eleven because they have their own, or like they work with someone. I don't know, but 7-Eleven will help you. Also, speaking of 7-Eleven, you can withdraw money from 7-Eleven, so that was like our main ATM point. And there are konbinis on practically every street corner. There are no bins in Japan. This is a documented thing, but when people say this, they're not exaggerating. There's next to no dustbins. So whatever rubbish you accumulate, you're carrying around during the day. And then also we found that the dustbins in our hotel rooms also weren't very big, so it was like we were carrying around the rubbish all day with the expectation that we would throw it when we got home. And then there was no space to throw it. So it was a struggle. That was one thing that I found inconvenient in Japan, to be perfectly honest. Other things were great, like, hello, public toilets, incredible. Coming back to London was such a shock and a disappointment after that. But, yeah, the bin situation is difficult. And the fact that there's a konbini on, like, every street corner, even in smaller towns, right, there's still a konbini not very far from you. So don't adopt the scarcity mindset or even, like, plan ahead. You do not need to plan ahead when it comes to your food, because we were initially doing it like, we'd plan ahead, like, oh, we'll get this food for now and then we'll get a snack to eat later on. It was like, no, just get what you need for right now. Get the snack when you need the snack. I promise you will have access to a snack. And you also don't want to be carrying the food around or the rubbish around any longer than you have to, really. Even with like the snack, and because it was hot, then it was like, okay, you're carrying around this thing and it's getting hot. If you're not hungry right now, then like just get yourself a fresh thing. I promise. I think more places in Japan are putting in dustbins now though because of tourists, and like just generally I know it's a problem with the tourists that they're just littering instead of taking the rubbish home. God, there was this one guy. So we were in Kyoto and we had a plastic bag with our stuff. So it was like empty water bottles and stuff, but also food. Like it wasn't rubbish, it was just the bag that we got from the convenience store and everything was still in there. And we stopped by this orange bin and it had a picture for a recycling bottle. So we were like, okay, cool, we can at least throw away some of the bottles here. So we were taking the bottles out of the bag and putting them in this bin. This guy comes cycling up the street and he's like, don't throw your trash here. And we were just like, what just happened? And then he swiveled around, like he turned around and he was like, did you understand me? I said, don't throw your trash here. And we were like, okay, understood. And we just walked away. And we were a bit confused because we were like, were we doing the wrong thing? I mean, it had a picture of bottles on the bin. So we were throwing away the plastic bottles in the recycling bin. Surely it was okay. Turns out it was okay. I think he misunderstood because we were taking them out of a plastic bag and he thought we were just dumping our general rubbish. And I will actually address this later on. But yeah, that was a thing. But dustbins are not a thing, so don't factor them into your plans. We got Holofly eSIMs with unlimited data. Highly recommend those. Those are really good. And also have some way to take out cash because at least if you're in Tokyo, you can get a Suica card, which is like an Oyster card or a Metro card or whatever. And you can get that on your phone. But I think you can only do that if you have an iPhone. And I don't have an iPhone. So I got a physical card anyway because we're in Fukuoka. And whatever, I have the physical card. But you need to not update that. Like put cash on it. You can't use your card to top it up. So have some way of getting cash out. We also did a couple of tourist experiences. We did a sumo show in Osaka and we did a sake tasting in Tokyo. And I was trying to avoid these kind of tourist experiences as much as possible because I was like, I don't know how I feel about these and like, is there a point to doing them? Like the whole like making your own chopsticks things, like, do I really care? But we did the sumo show and that was the first one we did. And we were like, you know what, actually, there was value in doing that. I'm really glad we did it, even if it was like only full of other tourists and it felt like this inauthentic thing, right? But then it was a learning lesson. Like they taught us about the history of sumo, the spirituality of sumo, why sumo is so important in Japanese culture. We learned how sumo works. Like if we had just gone to any other sumo competition and we'd seen it, like I wouldn't have understood all the different things that were going on or necessarily what constituted a win or whatever. I would have had to look it up, whereas here like the woman was talking it through and explaining it and it was very engaging and well done. So I'll put the link for this particular one in the show notes as well. Also the sake tasting we did in Tokyo because we did the one with the sommelier, so he was really going through and he was qualified like by the same people who do the WSET in London. I don't know if it's the WSET is like the name of the school or the qualification or whatever, but there's this wine qualification you can do to train as a sommelier, and they also have a sake one. He'd done the sake one, so it was really interesting actually getting to learn about sake, and it's like, okay, this is a big deal in Japan, but why is it a big deal? How is it made? And I got to try a bunch of different ones, so that was a really also good experience. I recommend that one. Oh, final thing I will say, final tip about Japan is that Google Maps is not super clear, and it's kind of confusing in Japan, so be aware of that. Google Maps is not going to be your best friend. We still got around fine with Google Maps. We were still able to do things, but it wasn't like we would walk through back roads and car parks and stuff quite a fair bit, or it'd take us a bit more circuitous routes. So yeah, I think they have their own apps that are really good for this kind of thing, but we didn't know what they were. We didn't want to faff with anything, quite frankly. Like I don't even use City Mapper in London. I just stick to Google Maps. Last time I tried to use City Mapper, I guess, like I'm sure the functionality has been improved and stuff since then, but yeah, whatever. So yeah, Google Maps isn't the best in Japan, but like you will get from point A to point B, so don't worry about it. Okay, finally, I've been recording for a very long time. It's very hot, and I feel tired. Definitely feeling it at this point. Treat. Okay. The treat is I couldn't think of what to say for this one, to be perfectly honest. But I was like, my biggest piece of advice that I would give to anyone who's going to Japan is get off the golden route. Getting off the golden route was the best thing we did by far, because like I was saying earlier, I felt all this expectation. It wasn't just about food. Like, I had to stick to the things that I saw on TikTok and I go to all these restaurants and stuff. It was just in general. It was a general problem. I was like, once we were in Tokyo especially, but also Kyoto and Osaka, it was like, we need to hit these points and we need to do these things. And like, I suddenly started feeling this pressure to do that. And it took away a lot of the magic of the experiences we had at the beginning of the trip, like talking to the owner of the okonomiyaki restaurant about Labradors, because he has a Labrador at home and he loves Labradors, and we have a Labrador, and because he has his Labrador, he collects donations for guide dogs, like Labradors that are guide dogs from blind people. And we had that conversation. I went to a random restaurant in Karatsu to get dinner, and I had a really great time talking to the chef there, just back and forth on Google Translate. Like, it was so chill. We had these really nice experiences with people, and we didn't have the space to do that outside of the golden route. But it was also like, those people didn't have the space. Like, the guy I was talking about in Kyoto who told us off the rubbish, it was very much a thing I felt in Kyoto. Like, Kyoto feels like it's become an amusement park of itself. It didn't feel like a city, and we went on a Saturday, so it was busy anyway. And I was just like half of this bus is full of tourists, and I don't begrudge the tourists who want to go to Kyoto, but I just think about how difficult it must be for the locals, right? Like, who are just trying to get around day to day, like this is their city, and they're struggling, or they can't get on this bus or whatever, they're stuck because it's just so. And it wasn't just the bus, right? The whole city was like that. It was just like everywhere we went, there were groups of tourists, and sure, we did do some touristy things, but we also went to like non-touristy areas and just walked around. It was chaos. It was really just jam-packed. And we noticed that people in Kyoto are a bit more like short-tempered because of it, and it was like, can you necessarily blame them? And this definitely is not me trying to shit on Kyoto at all. Like, to be perfectly clear, like, go visit Kyoto. But it's just that thing of like, if you're in these places that are so busy, you're not going to be able to have those experiences with people in the same way, or even for yourself. Like, my favorite places that we went that I would want to revisit, I mean, Tokyo had good shopping because there were so many, like, obviously shops and stuff there. I liked Osaka. We weren't there for very long, like, we were there for a day, but Osaka was a vibe. Like, the fashion was good. The fashion was interesting. As the fashion wasn't as fashiony as I would feel like Fukuoka was, but then it was still like, they still very much had their own like streetwear style in Osaka, right? My laptop is about to die. 6%. I should charge that soon. Okay, I'm gonna try and wrap this up. So yeah, Osaka was a vibe, and it was like there were lots of tourists in Osaka also, but they were able to coexist a lot more peacefully, like, with the people, and the people were able to coexist more peacefully with the tourists than in Kyoto. So I liked that about Osaka. It just seemed like a really nice chill place. Like, I don't know what there particularly is to do in Osaka still. Like, sure, you can eat, you can go to the Osaka Castle or whatever, but people kind of say Osaka Castle like not like a real tourist recommendation. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, oh, well, you can do it if you're here. Rambling now. Osaka and Hiroshima. Hiroshima, I just got a really good vibe from. We were there, like, we came in the afternoon, we left the next morning, so we really didn't get to spend a lot of time there. But again, it was just a really pleasant vibe, and I was like, I would like to spend more time here. Like, it's not a super big city, but it is still definitely a city, and I really can't put my finger on what was so nice about it, but it was. And just anywhere that isn't the golden route, like, I would love to spend more time in Kyushu. I really wanted to go to Kagoshima, but the Shinkansen was just like, there were too many delays and cancellations that day. And also my feet were super swollen, so it was like, it was actually a good thing that the Shinkansen wasn't working that day. But I wanted to climb Mount Sakurajima, so like, I definitely want to do that at some point. And I want to go to places in Kyushu that aren't very accessible by public transport, like Miyazaki Prefecture and all this kind of stuff. Like, and then the Shikoku, Hokkaido, Okinawa. Like, I really want to see more of Japan that isn't the golden route, because the golden route is lovely, but the best experiences we had by far were the places outside of that, and we wouldn't have gone if not for the things my husband had to do in Japan, and like the reason why we went. So shout out to him, I guess. All right, this is a very long episode. I'm gonna wrap this up. Any information will be left in the show notes below. I'm gonna try and compile like a Google Map thing that I can a Google Maps list or whatever that I can leave in the description box with my recommendations. But for now, I'm going to end this episode. So take care. We'll see you soon with a new one.